All right. I'm going to just kind of launch in then. Usually I give fairly brief updates. I'm going to apologize now. This one might not be quite as brief. It's been a while since we talked about 2045 in motion, our long-range transportation planning process, and we covered a lot of ground since we met last. So I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but we've got a lot to discuss. So kind of on the agenda today is I'm going to give a process to date update, just a quick recap on what we've accomplished so far, where we're at, and what we have left. I'll recap Destination 2045, our latest public meeting, kind of the outcomes from that process, some timeline changes, and then our next steps moving forward. I'll also apologize. My office is in my loft, so you might hear my children in the background because it's pretty open. Okay, so process today. As a reminder, last year we launched 2045 in motion, our long-range transportation planning process in March and April. We formed our stakeholder committee with roughly 25 members representing very diverse backgrounds and a cross-section of our entire region. So all of Madison County plus Daleville and Fortville, the representation for that committee. From the formation of the stakeholder committee, we shifted directly into public engagement process last June with our mobile workshops, and we held 6 meetings across the MPA as part of our mobility conversations in July and August. Following that, we hosted 7 focus group meetings in early December. Those 7 focus groups were centered around different topics that we had identified from the mobility conversations that we still had some gap in understanding. That was anything from like technology and innovation to transit to freight and logistics issues. We had roughly 3 to 10 participants in each of those 7 focus group meetings that we hosted over 2 days. Then obviously throughout all of these steps, we've been kind of pulling together data, analyzing the region, and continuing to develop our travel demand model. We kind of left off our...
Jerry, I'm in here. I'm in, Jerry.
Sorry, so who just joined us? I didn't hear.
Jack Kiesling's in.
Jack, thank you for joining us. I was just giving an update on 2045 in motion.
Tim Stiers has joined as well.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Have we had anybody else new join us? I'm not seeing the participants anymore, so. All right, I'll continue then. We left off our process kind of the last time that I gave an update just before Destination 2045. That was kind of set to be the largest single event for our process, really focused on visioning for the overall document, kind of the guiding structure for the document. We hosted that in early March at Anderson University. Luckily, we got that event hosted just the week before the stay-at-home order was put in place. So that's really kind of where we left off with our last meeting. So I did want to recap that event quickly. We had roughly 75 attendees at Destination 2045. We did record the event, so for anybody who wasn't able to attend, I highly encourage you to jump on our website, 2045inmotion.com. We have different clips, video clips for each presentation available for your viewing, so you can kind of follow along with what was said. I definitely encourage everybody at least to go look at the presentation by Gabe Klein, our keynote speaker at that event. I think we have it broken up into 3 different categories, but he covered a lot on the history of transportation, best practices, and the future of transportation systems. I guess for those who aren't aware, Gabe Klein, our keynote at that event, is the author of Startup City, and the previous commissioner for both the Chicago and DC DOTs.
Chris?
So he did a really good job of kind of setting the stage for thinking about the future and beyond kind of where we're at today. So we gained a lot of valuable insight on the plan, direction, and investment priorities from that. And that's kind of what I'm going to recap
Okay.
quickly. So
Okay.
we did have table discussions that we dove into throughout that meeting, but we also did some interactive polling questions post presentation. So that event was really set up to where we did presentations at the forefront to get kind of everybody at the same page, kind of level setting. Then we did some basic polling questions to find out, who was there and what their interests are and how they would invest money. And then we shifted into kind of small group table discussions for some more qualitative, discussion. Well, we kind of had a general theme throughout the results, focused around bicycle and pedestrian amenities and transit improvements. So I'm just going to pull out kind of the quick highlights from the polling questions. So we had kind of the first one up was, or at least the first one that I'm recapping here is, aside from weather, what would encourage you to walk more? Here they ranked by priority. So each person had an opportunity with these four to put them in first, second, third, and fourth place, and that's how they prioritized. And we got these final results. So here we were really talking more about sidewalk infrastructure and expanded trail networks as kind of the top priorities for encouraging walking. We asked a similar question for transit, kind of your priority measures. And actually here I was a little surprised by the results. I think this kind of indicates a low-hanging fruit action item for us. Attendees noted the top issue actually was just understanding the transit options here. While Tram doesn't necessarily have this option, Katz and Anderson could add their routes and their timing to Google and Google Maps. And I think that would help generally increase transit ridership just by allowing people to have the understanding and the ability to plan transit trips using Google Maps. So that might kind of help. And it's a very easy process to work with Google to get added onto their system. So I think that's one item that came up, at least highlighted here, and then further in the small group discussions was just the opportunity to add cats onto Google Maps. Again, the bike ped initiative, bike ped and public transit kind of popped out in our ranking of initiatives for emissions reductions as kind of the top priorities or top initiatives that people would support. And then finally, for investment questions, we gave everybody a theoretical $100 million in $10 million increments, and we asked them to allocate that within these 6 different options. So you're seeing here kind of the culmination of everybody's results and the percentage allocation that people would provide within the 6 categories. So again, we saw kind of the highest, the top 2 priorities were bike ped infrastructure and transit improvements. And I'd say too that even though this is only kind of a small group of our entire MPA, this whole hierarchy of these 6 options kind of mimics what we've been hearing for the past 5+ years across the MPA. So in addition to investment priorities, Destination 2045 sought to solidify the plan guiding statements. Generally, plans have a vision statement as the highest level of guidance, followed by supporting goals, objectives, and finally actions. I'll say that our stakeholder committee challenged us to add to kind of the standard hierarchy a mission statement to further guide the process. So at Destination 2045, we presented kind of our draft statement that we were developing in conjunction with our stakeholder committee. You can think of the difference between the mission and the vision statements kind of as the mission guiding the approach. It's a little bit more hands-on. It permeates through every level of the process. So you're thinking more process-oriented, while the vision statement is more painting a picture of what the world looks like kind of at the end of the document. So there you want to think more on the outcome level. So in addition to presenting just our draft statements and soliciting for general reactions, we also asked for, what was missing from the vision statement. And here it was an open-ended question, and key words or phrases were pulled out from what people provided back. So obviously the scale here kind of indicates the number of times that it was brought up. So the four that jump out are safety, environment, quality of life, and partnerships that were missing from the original vision statements. So the draft mission statement, again, remember, this is the approach. This is part of the process, how the process is crafted. The draft mission statement that we came up with post Destination 2045, after incorporating updates from that event, is we aspire to create a safe and complete transportation system that puts people first. So this is really a people oriented decision-making process. I'll say post Destination 2045, what we added to this statement was the safe. The word safe was not originally in what we presented, and since that came up as missing, that was one that we added in. But the results, the reaction generally from the original statement was a 4.4 out of 5 rating, which we consider to be pretty good for getting people on board. Additionally, then the vision statement is through 2045 in motion. We aim to realize a transportation system that is efficient, effective, and equitable. This statement received a 4.5 out of 5 across the attendees at Destination 2045. We actually did not modify this statement at all. So this is exactly the same statement that we presented at Destination 2045. We did, however, modify the principal statements, which are the goal level below this. So I'll switch to that. So principal statements, these are goal levels supporting the vision. These are basically the definition of the 3 items that were highlighted within the vision. So efficient, meaning that we're going to emphasize strategic investments through collaboration that enhances existing assets, community connectivity, and use of land. In this statement, this is where we added that collaboration, which was based off of the guidance that we were missing, some discussion on partnerships. Well, that we have effective, as the system seamlessly integrates multiple modes of transportation and embraces innovation to safely connect our community locally and regionally. And then finally, we defined equitable, meaning ensuring all residents have access to the growing opportunities of the broader region with sensitivity to environmental and health impacts, which were added, that kind of final line was added post Destination 2045. So combining all of these from Destination 2045, right, then we had a fairly solid vision statement. The mission statement was set in place, and then finally the principles supporting the vision. The next step being kind of the work down towards actions, and we
Yeah, I
were
have-
missing kind of this branch between the goal level principal statements and the action items, which are kind of the final outcomes of the 2045 in motion document. So we use this branch opportunity to directly relate back to the mission statement, and we developed what we're calling project categories that are all developed in relation to what the action or improvement is doing to or for people, pulling that back to the mission statement. So our words here, right, are protect, move, connect, and educate. Those are kind of the 4 objective level options that we have underneath the principal statements. So here you can imagine that a safety improvement project would fall within the protect category. But you'll notice that our overall structure is not quite as tight as the standard format, where you have a goal and objectives directly below that goal, and then action items directly below the objectives. And there's no cross population for action items. One of the ideas that we had around our final guiding structure was not limiting action items to be buried within one objective or one goal, but instead allowing it to illustrate that we don't want to just accomplish one of the 3 principles, but we want action items that are going to accomplish multiple things at once. So our structure is maybe a little bit less tight than kind of the standard structure that that plans tend to follow. So that's kind of wrapping up what we got out of Destination 2045. So our overall process then, kind of our next steps, we're looking towards regional exhibition. We did have 2 items that have kind of delayed our overall timeline. Shouldn't come as a shock to anybody, but COVID-19 obviously impacted and delayed some of our work here up front, but it's also kind of impacted our ability to gather input on the final action items, which are really the next phase that we're planning to shift into, is identifying the final actions. The hope was originally post Destination 2045 to host a round of meetings that we were calling the regional exhibition. This was going to be a presentation in multiple locations around the MPA on the final action items. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, we don't really see when we're going to be able to host in-person meetings like we were hoping for. So we're trying to build alternatives for that kind of round of meetings, and we expect that virtual engagement, while great because people don't have to jump into a meeting, takes a little bit longer to get the same amount of input. So we're kind of planning to extend our process a little bit to allow for additional time to gather that input that we don't currently have for the final projects. So whereas we were originally hoping to have a draft document ready in early May and look for an adoption date actually today, we're planning to shift our entire timeline back a little bit, and kind of depending on how input looks later on in July and August, or June and July, sorry, we may be looking at either an August adoption date or an October adoption date to kind of allow for that additional facilitation of public input. So unfortunately, our timeline is changing a little bit here, but there's only so much that we can do to gather this sort of input. Finally, kind of our next steps, we are still planning to release our draft document. Hopefully here in the next few weeks, we have a good chunk of the text written at this point, with the exception of kind of the final action items, obviously. Another item that we have that is kind of delaying our overall process is the travel demand model, and we really have to have that fully developed for forecasting before we can finalize kind of the performance and impacts of projects to incorporate within the plan. So our hope is that towards the end of June, we'll be able to release our draft document for review. We've got many different organizations and people who are planning to review this. So obviously the policy board and the TAC would be part of that review process. Our stakeholder committee will review it, NDOT and Federal Highway will review it, and then we'll continue to review it internally to make sure that it really fits exactly what the general public wants. And then the regional exhibition would focus on two things. One, the draft document, and two, the final action item list. But basically the document, so that you're all kind of aware when you do receive it, is kind of broken up into these 4 different categories, answering the questions of where are we now, where do we want to go, what else do we look at, what else do we consider, and then how do we get there. That's kind of generally the structure of the document, and we're really excited to get it into your hands as soon as we can, as soon as we have everything really in a good place. We're really excited about how things are coming together and the level of input that we've been able to gather to this date. We just want to make sure that, you know, with our additional time, we can really kind of finalize and have a very solid product here in August or October. So with that, I will open it up for questions. And again, I apologize for kind of the length of the presentation, but